I had always been fascinated with the paranormal, but I never expected to have a ghostly encounter of my own. It was a warm summer evening, and I had just moved into a new house. Despite the excitement of starting a new chapter in my life, I couldn't shake the eerie feeling that something wasn't quite right in the house. As I was settling into bed, I heard a faint whispering sound. At first, I dismissed it as my imagination, but the sound grew louder and more distinct. It sounded like a voice, but I couldn't make out what it was saying. I sat up in bed, my heart racing as the sound grew louder and more intense. I could feel a presence in the room with me, but I couldn't see anything. Suddenly, the room grew cold, and the whispering stopped. The silence was almost more frightening than the whispered voice had been. I cautiously looked around the room, but there was nothing there. But then, out of nowhere, a dark figure appeared at the end of my bed. My breath caught in my throat as the figure moved closer to me, its eyes glowing red. I was paralyzed with fear as the figure leaned in close to my face, its icy breath sending shivers down my spine. I could feel its cold embrace surrounding me, freezing me to the core. I tried to scream, but no sound came out of my mouth. I was trapped in this ghostly encounter, unable to escape. But then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure vanished. I was left alone, confused and trembling in fear. For days after the encounter, I was unable to sleep, haunted by the memory of the ghostly figure. It was a reminder that there are forces in the world that are beyond our control, and they can be both terrifying and fascinating at the same time. I remember the night vividly, as if it happened just yesterday. It was a cold, wintry evening, and I was curled up in my bed, reading a book. I had just finished a particularly scary chapter when I heard a strange noise coming from the hallway. At first, I brushed it off as just the wind rattling the doors and windows. But as the noise grew louder and more persistent, I knew that it wasn't just my imagination playing tricks on me. I slowly got out of bed, my heart racing in my chest. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was watching me. Something was there with me in the room. I tiptoed towards the door, peering out into the darkness. My eyes adjusted to the dim light as I squinted to see the outline of what appeared to be a shadowy figure slowly making its way towards me. I froze in fear, not knowing what to do. I tried to scream, but my voice was stuck in my throat. As the figure got closer, I realized that it was a woman, or at least her shadow looked like one. She was wearing a long, flowing dress and had long, flowing hair that seemed to dance in the wind, even though there was no wind blowing through the house. I watched in horror as she glided towards me, her eyes fixed on mine. I tried to back away, but my feet wouldn't move, as if I was rooted to the spot. As she got closer, her shadow began to grow larger until it was towering over me. I could feel her presence in the room, her cold breath on my neck, her voice whispering in my ear. "Leave this place," she whispered, her voice hoarse and raspy. I couldn't move, completely frozen in fear. I didn't know what to do, where to go. I had never believed in ghosts until that very moment. Suddenly, she disappeared into thin air, leaving me alone in the room with my thoughts. My heart was still pounding in my chest as I tried to catch my breath. I knew that I had to get out of there, that I had to leave that house and never return. As I packed my things, I couldn't help but wonder who the ghostly woman was and why she had decided to haunt me that night. I may never know the answers, but one thing was for sure. I had never been more scared in my life, and I will never forget that night. It was just another ordinary day for me, or so I thought. I had finished my chores for the day and settled into bed, ready to catch up on some much-needed rest. But little did I know that my peaceful slumber was about to be interrupted. I remember being jolted awake by a strange noise, which sounded like someone shuffling around in my room. I sat up in bed, my heart beating fast in my chest, and listened carefully. At first, I convinced myself that maybe it was just the sound of the wind, or me just being paranoid, but as the noise persisted, I knew there was something off. To make matters worse, the room was icy cold, even though the heating was on full blast. I could see my breath as I looked around the room, and it sent shivers down my spine. But then, something caught my eye in the corner of the room. I squinted, trying to focus on it, and saw the faint outline of a figure watching me from the shadows. could feel its gaze, and it sent chills down my spine. I rubbed my eyes, hoping it was just the aftermath of a bad dream, but the shadow remained, watching me with unblinking eyes. As I gazed into its formless silhouette, I began to feel a sense of dread wash over me. It was like I was being watched by something evil, something that wanted to harm me. I tried to scream, but my voice was silenced by the fear that gripped me. Then came the whispers, a low, monotone sound, speaking a language I could not understand. The figure slowly drifted closer to my bed until it was hovering right above me. I could feel its cold breath on my face as it whispered something in my ear, its words sending a wave of terror through me. "Get out!" it hissed, its voice shaking the air around me. The next thing I knew, the shadowy figure had vanished, and the room once again fell silent. But I knew that it was no mere hallucination or nightmare. It was something real, something that I could not ignore. It took me hours to calm down, but I knew I had to leave the room. The following day, I consulted with a paranormal expert, and to my horror, I was told that the previous tenant of the house had committed suicide in that very same room. I immediately packed my things, moved out, and never looked back. I still bear scar of that night, and sometimes I wonder if that shadowy figure still haunts that room, waiting for its next victim.